Before the pyramids of Egypt rose above the desert, before Rome ruled the Mediterranean with iron and law, before Greece gave the world its philosophers, its heroes, its gods, there was a land that gave those civilizations something they could not have survived without. A land where, for the very first time in human history, people decided that some things were too important to leave to memory. They wrote them down. In the south of what we now call Iraq, two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, run almost parallel for hundreds of miles before emptying into the sea. The Greeks called this region Mesopotamia, the land between rivers. It was a landscape of extremes. In summer, the heat was merciless. The rivers could flood without warning, destroying crops and leveling homes. There were no mountains to hide behind, no natural barriers to stop an invader, and yet people came and stayed and built, because the soil of the river floodplain was almost miraculous. Each year, when the floods receded, they left behind a fresh layer of rich silt. With the right management, canals, ditches, careful planting, this land could feed thousands. And feeding thousands meant something new was possible. Cities. By around 3500 BCE, a city called Uruk had become the largest settlement on Earth. Tens of thousands of people lived within its walls: farmers, merchants, priests, soldiers, and craftsmen. Uruk was not just big, it was organized. It had institutions, it had hierarchy. It had something no human settlement had ever possessed before in quite this form. It had government. At the center of every Sumerian city stood a ziggurat, a great stepped temple tower that rose above everything else, visible for miles across the flat plain. But the ziggurat was more than a place of worship. It was a statement of cosmic order, a message to the gods in the sky and to the people below. This city has divine favor. This city is protected. The priesthood that controlled the ziggurat controlled something just as important as the gods' goodwill. They controlled the grain. Temple storehouses held the city's food supply. Priests organized the redistribution of resources: who worked, who ate, who received payment. The temple economy was the economy, and the priests who ran it were, in many respects, the most powerful people in the city. Alongside the priests stood the king, the lugal, or great man. Kings commanded armies, they negotiated treaties, they led festivals and presided over justice. And they needed to know exactly what they owned, what they owed, and what they were owed. Which is why in Sumer, someone invented writing. Around 3400 BCE, Sumerian scribes began pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets using sharpened reeds. At first, these marks were simple accounting symbols: how much grain entered the storehouse, how many workers received their rations, how many sheep grazed outside the walls. This writing system, which we call cuneiform, from the Latin word for wedge, was not invented as an art form or a spiritual exercise. It was invented to keep track of things. But once humans had a tool for recording information, there was no limit to what could be recorded. Laws, treaties, hymns, royal decrees, recipes, medical treatments, mathematical problems, epic poetry. The world's first known author was a Sumerian priestess named Enheduanna, who lived around 2300 BCE and composed hymns to the goddess Inanna. For the first time in history, a human being had put their name to their own words, and those words survived them by 4,000 years. Writing changed everything. Laws written down are laws that can be enforced consistently. Trade agreements recorded in clay can be disputed, verified, and honored across generations. History written down becomes history that survives. Before Sumer, human knowledge lived and died with individual people. After Sumer, it could outlast them forever. But for all their brilliance, the Sumerians had one fundamental weakness: they could not unite. Each city was a world unto itself. Uruk and Kish, Lagash and Umma. These were not merely rivals, they were, to their inhabitants, the only cities that truly mattered. Their gods were the true gods, their kings were divinely appointed, their walls were the boundary between civilization and chaos, and so they fought. For centuries, the city-states of Sumer warred with one another over irrigation water, border fields, and trade routes. The cycle was almost mechanical. One city would dominate, then weaken, then fall to another. Lagash defeated Umma, Kish rose to supremacy, then Uruk, then another city, then another. The wars produced legendary rulers, Gilgamesh of Uruk, whose name would eventually inspire the world's first great work of literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the wars also produced exhaustion. City by city, generation by generation, Sumer was wearing itself down. Around 2334 BCE, a man rose to power in the northern city of Akkad, who would change the map of the known world. His name was Sargon. We do not know his birth name. Sargon is a royal title meaning true king. Legends say he was a man of low birth who rose through the ranks by his own ability and ruthlessness. What is certain is that he was a military genius of the first order. Sargon did not just defeat the Sumerian cities. He conquered them systematically, one after another, until he controlled more territory than any ruler before him, stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Historians call his domain the Akkadian Empire. It is, by most accounts, the world's first true empire. Sargon was clever in how he ruled. He did not destroy Sumerian culture, he absorbed it. Sumerian scribes continued to write. Sumerian temples continued to function. But power now flowed from Akkad, and the Akkadian language began to replace Sumerian in government, trade, and everyday speech. Sumer did not vanish in a single dramatic fall. There was no last stand, no single catastrophe. It was absorbed, layer by layer, into the world it had helped to create. The Akkadians who conquered Sumer used Sumerian writing. The Babylonians who came after used Sumerian law as their template. The Assyrians preserved Sumerian literature in their great libraries. Even in later centuries, scholars learned the dead Sumerian language the way medieval monks learned Latin, as the tongue of the sacred past. Writing, urban government, legal codes, tax systems, monumental architecture, organized religion with trained clergy and established ritual, mathematics, astronomy. Every one of these inventions traces its roots to those sun-baked cities between the rivers. When Rome built its laws, it was building on foundations that began in Sumer. When medieval monks copied manuscripts to preserve knowledge, they were carrying on a tradition that began in Sumer. When you send an email, post a message, file a record, you are doing what the scribes of Uruk first did in clay, 5,500 years ago. Civilization did not begin with Rome. It did not begin with Egypt. It began here, in the mud of the rivers, in the heat of the plains, in the cities of Sumer. And from those first cities, from those first words pressed into clay, history itself began.